I want to talk about Kobe Bryant, Oprah Winfrey, Joyce Meyers, and Billy Graham. Um, and I want to talk about them because the interaction that I had with them. So, in 1978, I was in a gym, and I had the basketball in my hand, and I was past half court, and I threw it, and it went in, and it went into the basket, and I thought that was highly unusual for that to happen like that, but it did. And then uh, and then years later, um, 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 little did I know that Kobe Bryant was born that year. Um, and the reason I bring that up is because years later I had a dream about Kobe Bryant, and I didn't know why Kobe Bryant was in my dream. But I think that as I look back at it now, I think that because of I had that basketball in my hand, I think that at that moment that was my the power of was released at that point when it came to the basketball. When it came to basketball because it went in past half court. And I just think that because Kobe Bryant was born that year, and the reason I know that because when Kobe Bryant had died in 2020, something said go back and look at the year Kobe Bryant was born, and there it was. He was born in 1978, and 1978 was the same year that I was in the gym, and I know where I was at in the gym, and it went in, and I think that the power was released, and Kobe Bryant actually was born that year, and for some reason I think I a power was released in his life, and because then years later, around 1997, 98, 99, somewhere around there, 2000, I had a dream about Kobe Bryant as well, and I was like, and he was on the TV set, and I was like, I don't know why he's there, because I wasn't attracted to Kobe Bryant, or he wasn't my favorite basketball player either, and so I didn't really know why he was there in the dream. But now I do. I think that once I threw that basketball up in the court at the court and past half court and it went in, I think power was released and a star was born, which was Kobe Bryant. And I had a dream about Kobe Bryant in 1997, 98, 99, 2000. And at that point, I knew who Bryant was at that point because around that time, Kobe Bryant was in the NBA at that time. So I knew who he was when I had the dream. I was like, hey, why is Kobe Bryant in my dream? But I think that Kobe Bryant was born that same year that I threw that basketball up at the court. And it went in. Not what was unusual about it was that uh, I threw it in past half court and it went in. And I think once I threw it up and it went, and I think it was spectacular with that. And then a star was born, which is Kobe Bryant, becomes one of the most famous basketball players in history. And then I dream about him in 98, 97, 98, 99, 2000. And by then, he was a star at that point. And I was like, I didn't know why he was there, but I think that the touch, for some reason, that I had on his life, that he became the star that he is. For some reason, when I threw that basketball up at the court, and I'm getting ready to talk about other people that would explain the same type of behavior, like Oprah Winfrey. I remember I was in a specific town, and I remember walking in a room that I was, and I wanted to hear some news, and so I went to the TV and I turned it on, and it was this black woman sitting up at the news desk, and little did I know that that was Oprah Winfrey. I didn't know at the time because I didn't get her name, and only again, this was only like a 1 to 2 minute time period, because I came in and turned the TV on just for a few minutes, and then I left out the room. But while I was in the room, Oprah Winfrey was on the TV set. I didn't know at the time because I didn't get her name, but I knew that how she looked and stuff like that. And so years about I would say about maybe 3 4 years later, she gets her TV show, the Oprah Winfrey Show, and at some point after she got her show, she began to show the programs that she did as the news, and there it was, the same girl that I seen on the TV set when I walked in the room and turned the TV on, and it was her, and some said go and look back and see like her story or whatever, and see where she was at and where she did the news, and it was her. And it was her, and it was in 1982, 83 period, somewhere around there, and she did do the news around that period, and like that. So I was like, yeah, that was her. But I think at that moment I didn't know why. I was like, well, why did what was it about her at that moment? What was it about her at that moment that I and I thought, I was like, again, I think the power was released once again, because little did I know that she would become one of the most famous African American females in the future. And I was like, just like Kobe Bryant, little did I know that he was born that year. I didn't know that he was going to become one of the most famous African American basketball players. And here I see it with the same thing with Oprah. I see the same type of like situation where I turned once I turned that TV on and saw her on there. It was like something happened at that moment, like a power was released at that moment, and and she was doing the news and stuff like that, and I'm like, um, and so and so she became famous, and I was like, well, that's the same situation that happened with Kobe. It was like, I don't know. First, it became the basketball with him. Then it became the TV with her. All I did was walk in the room and turn the TV on, and there she was. and here she became one of the most famous African American females in the future, just like Kobe. Like he became the most one of the most African American males of basketball players in the future. Same situation. Um, uh, and and then um, I seen Joyce Myers. I seen Joyce Myers, and it was uh, uh, in the early 90s, probably 80, 89, 89, 90, 91, somewhere around there. I seen her. Walked in the room, and she was on the TV, and she was walking back and forth on stage, talking to the people in the audience, and and I don't think that she was famous at the time. Neither was Oprah or Kobe, because Kobe Bryant was just born that same year that I threw the basketball up. So Oprah was doing the news, so she hadn't became famous yet. And so when I think about Joyce Myers, I don't think Joyce Myers was famous at the time that I seen her on the TV. I walked in the room and seen her on the TV, and she was walking back and forth talking to the people in the audience, and and she um like that, right? And I was like, and she was tall and skinny and with short hair, and I knew that was her. I was like, that looked like her. So about 10 years, about I think about 10 years later, I seen her again. I ran into Joyce Myers again, and she um was like doing. She was famous at that point. She was preaching the word of God and stuff. I was like, "That's her. That's the woman I seen on the TV back in the early '90s. Like that. That's her. That's her." And little did I know that back in in 90s and 91, that she will become one of the most famous preachers, female, because at that time, there was a lot of males who were preachers, but for her to step out there, it's amazing. Was amazing. This, as I look back at it now, it was amazing for her to step out there and do that, when most males were doing it, and she stepped out there and now here in 2021, she's still doing it, and she became one of the most famous preachers of female preachers, and when I look at Kobe Bryant, Oprah, and Joyce Myers, none of them were famous at the time that when I first saw them. With Kobe Bryant, it was like when I threw the basketball up at the court, he was just born at that time. So I didn't see him throughout when he was growing up, but he was born at that time. So he was not famous. Nor was Oprah Winfrey. She was doing the news. So she wasn't like famous. She wasn't famous yet. And so when I think about Joyce Myers, I don't think Joyce Myers was famous either. I don't think she was famous as far as worldwide. I don't think she was famous worldwide at the time that I seen her on the TV. But here, they all was I seen for the I've known for the first time, like, and with the exception of Kobe Bryant, because Kobe Bryant was born that year when I threw the basketball. But with Oprah and Joyce Myers, they were not famous at the time, and I was like, well, um, um, uh, uh, like I'm not famous. I mean, I'm not a great preacher. I'm not, a talk show host or anything like that. So, like, what does they have in common with me? And I'll talk about that in a few minutes. But let's talk about Billy Graham. I remember the first time I seen Billy Graham. I was flicking through the channels, and I ran into him, and I was like, um, uh, uh, um, I stopped to see what he was talking about and stuff like that, and he was talking about God. And at that moment, this was like in the late 70s, 78, 79, somewhere around there, And he was talking about God. And I end up turning the channel. And the reason I say that, I did do that, but I don't think I was ready, or really into God at that point. And so I turned the TV. Um, and I think in around 25 to 30 years later, I was flicking through the channel again, and I ran into him again. And this time, I found out his name, because it was like that with Oprah, um, Joyce Meyers, and Billy Graham. I didn't know any of their names at the first time I saw them. I didn't find out their names till later when they became famous. And so when I ran the second time I ran into Billy Graham, I was flicking through the TV, and I was like, "Hey, that's the guy that I saw when I was flicking through the TV," and I stopped to see what he was doing. And he was preaching to, he was up at the pulpit, and he was preaching to the audience. And again, the first time, and then the second time I seen him, he was on TV, and he was doing the same thing. And I was like, "Hey, that's the guy. That's him. That's the guy that I saw on TV about 25, 30 years later." And his name, I finally get to know his name, and his name was Billy Graham, just like that, And I was like, "What?" And, I was surprised. I mean, because I mean, and at that time, when the first time I seen it, I think Billy Graham at that point, as I look back at it now, he was famous in his own right. In his own right, he was well on his way. He was already into to preaching at the time, because I seen some tapes he did early in the '60s. But this time, it was it was probably in the late '70s that I seen him. So he was already out there preaching for a while. So and so I think that Billy Graham was the I think when I ran into him the second time, I was like, "Well, what did that mean?" Because I think at that time I was into God, and the second time that I ran into him, I was into God. But I ran into him again down for the second time, and I started looking up to see what time he was on TV. I know that that day that he was preaching, and I was like, let me see when he come on again and stuff like that. And I started watching Billy Graham and stuff like that. And not only that, it was about God too, man. And I think God played a big role in that, and stuff like that. But but when I look at Kobe Bryant and Joyce Meyers and Oprah and Billy Graham, I'm like, I'm not famous. I don't play basketball. I don't preach. I don't um I'm not a talk show host or anything like that. I think I dip and dab in a little of I don't know about the preaching, but I like the news, to talk the news, and I did like to play basketball at that time when I do the basketball up at the court. But my thing with that is this: I came in contact with them, with those four, and for some reason, I think that power was released. Um, I think that plays a role. I think power was released in their lives when I came in contact with them, because I see them in the same type way. They start off, you know, with the exception of Billy Graham, but Billy Graham became even more famous, after the time that I seen him. The first time, and then I seen him the second time. He was more famous. So, when I think about the times that I seen them, I was like, well, what does that have to do with me? Does that have anything to do with me? Did they make an impact on me? And I was like, well, they wasn't famous yet, though. Kobe Bryant was just born when I do the basketball up at the court. He was just born. So he didn't impact me at that point. So I was like, well, what did I do? I think power, once I do the basketball up at the court, power was released in his life and a star was born, like that. That's the only thing I could think of. How else would I know? And then I have a dream about him in 1970. I mean 1997, 8, 9, 2000. And I have a dream about him, and I think that was God's way of showing me who was the star that was born in 1978. Once I threw the basketball up, and that star, once I threw the basketball up, had the basketball in my hand, and I threw it up past half court. This was extraordinary because I was way past half court, and I threw it up toward the basket and it went in. And to me, that is spectacular because then after that, a star was born. And that star was Kobe Bryant. And then again in 1996, 1997, 98, 99, 2000, I have this dream about him and he's on this TV set. And and I was like, why is he there? But I think that was God's way of showing me who that star was, and that person was the um, one of the famous basketball players in history, and like that, and that's what he became, and stuff like that. And I was like, because I was thinking about the power released at the time I threw the basketball up at the court. That power was released in Kobe Bryant's life, and the star was born that same year. I mean, power was released, and the star was born, and then I had the dream about him. 97, 98, 99, 2000. And then and I recognized who he was at that moment and stuff like that. And I'm gonna talk about Kobe Bryant another different time, but I was just wanted to talk about that. But what made me think about him is that that they all became famous. They all I saw all of them on TV with Kobe Bryant. I seen him on TV in a dream. Um, but he became famous, and I think like once I threw that basketball up at the court, man, and a star was born. And that same year I threw the basketball up, and he became he became one of the most famous basketball players in history. Like that. And Oprah Winfrey, the same thing. Once I went over there and cut the TV on and seen her on there. And little did I know I was looking at one of the most famous African American females and in the future. And and I was like, was power released in her life for me once I turned that TV on? Just like the basketball, just like that basketball with Kobe, and he was just born. Was power released once I turned that TV on and saw her on there? Was power released at that moment? Again, this is another one that I seen on TV, and she became one of the most famous African American females in the future. Same thing with Kobe Bryant. And I'm thinking like, what did I do? And I think that once I came in contact with them, power was released in their lives. And like that. And the same thing with Joyce Meyers. Once I walked in the room and seen her on the TV, another TV set, and seeing her on the TV, I walked in the room and I seen her on the TV and I heard her talk for a few minutes or whatever, and then I walked out the room. I think while I was there in the room, power was released in her life, and she became one of the most famous African American preachers. Most famous. She became the most one of the most famous um, preachers, female preachers in the future, just like the rest of them, you know. And Billy Graham, the same thing. I think Billy Graham became more famous when I seen him on the TV set preaching at the pulpit, and then I runs into him again, and he's still doing the same thing, preaching at the pulpit. I think he became more famouser. But all of them were, all of them I seen on TV. All of them became famous. They was not famous in the beginning, but all of them. With the exception of Billy Graham, he was famous as a preacher in his own right, but I think he became more famous. But when I look at Kobe Bryant and Joyce and Oprah, they were not famous. They're the first time I saw them, but they became famous. All of them. I seen them all on TV. I seen them all on and I was like, I seen them all on TV. All of them for the first time, and then I all of them for the first time, and then I and then they all became rich and famous in their own right. And I was like, ain't this something? Because you don't. I don't really get yeah, and all and they were like 1 to 2 minutes. Joyce, Billy Graham, and Oprah. I seen them on the TV 1 to 2 minutes, so I really didn't have enough time with them to get a lot of information. But I said, what did I do? What did I do? um, uh, uh, you know, did they impact my life in the 2 minutes that I saw them? I don't think so. Not in a way that, as if you had watched them for 30 minutes or something like that. But it was only a 1 to 2 minute thing, and and I asked myself, did I have an impact on them? Because it was like only a 1 to 2 minute thing when I first saw them. I was like, did they have an impact on me? I think Oprah, seeing her as one of the African American female news person,